She snatched the note out of my hand, read it out loud slowly, like she was sounding out words for a child, and said in front of everyone, "A housekeeper who can't read doesn't belong in this house." I felt the floor disappear beneath me. I felt the apron heavy on my body like it was made of stone. I felt every pair of eyes in that hallway land on me at the same time, and the silence that followed was the kind of silence that hurts more than anything anyone could say out loud. It was my first day in that house. I had woken up at 5 in the morning, ironed my blue blouse, had coffee with toast and no butter because I was saving money, and arrived 40 minutes early because that's who I am: punctual, careful, serious. I was 43 years old, 4 decades of honest work in my hands, and I was starting another job the way every woman in my position starts one, with hope and with fear at the same time. Ashley Whitmore was 23 years old. She had a condo paid for by her father in Beverly Hills, a bag that cost more than 6 months of my salary, and the absolute certainty that she had every right to destroy me. What she didn't know, what nobody in that house knew, was that I knew a man she needed far more than I needed that job, and he was about to show up. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged for something you didn't choose, and still proved, without saying a single word, that it said absolutely nothing about who you are? Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, because this story is for you. To understand how that morning changed not just my life but the reputation of an entire family, I need to take you back. I need to tell you who I was before I walked into that house in Bel Air, and why Ashley Whitmore's mistake was the greatest gift anyone had ever given me without knowing it. My name is Loretta May Washington. I was born in Greenville, Mississippi, the 5th of 7 children, in a house with a screen door that never quite closed right, and a kitchen that smelled like cornbread and pine cleaner. My mother cleaned houses in the white neighborhoods on the other side of town. My father worked at a tire shop 6 days a week. From the time I was old enough to carry a bucket, I went to work with my mother on Saturdays, learning how to fold fitted sheets, how to get water rings off wood furniture, how to make a home feel cared for by people who were never going to be thanked for it. School was something I tried. I went when I could. I stopped when I had to. In my family, I had to stop more than I could go. I made it through 3rd grade, learned to recognize letters, learned to write my name, Loretta May Washington, with that careful penmanship of someone who knows the pencil won't last forever, but stringing it all together into words on a page, into sentences that moved from left to right and made sense when they came back out. That step never came. Not because I couldn't, because I never had the right place and the right time and the right person all at once. What I learned the way people learn when they don't have books, by listening, by watching, by memorizing. I had a memory that confused people around me from the time I was little. My mother would send me to the corner store with a list I couldn't read, and I'd come back with everything right, not missing a single item. I memorized recipes the first time I heard them. I memorized routes after walking a street just once. I memorized faces, names, dates, whole stories told in passing. My mind held on to everything my eyes couldn't read off a page. At 19, I got on a Greyhound bus and came to Los Angeles with a duffel bag and the phone number of a cousin who lived in Inglewood. I arrived with $240 in my pocket and had my first job as a housekeeper in Culver City within a week. The lady of the house asked me if I could cook. I told her yes. She asked what I knew how to make. I recited 26 dishes from memory, without stopping, without hesitating. She looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to believe me. The following week, she was asking me to show her daughter how to make my peach cobbler. 24 years in Los Angeles. 24 years of houses, families, kitchens I learned to run without ever needing to read a recipe. 24 years of children I cared for with more attention than some of their own parents ever gave them. 24 years of work with proper paperwork. I always insisted on being put on the books, from the very beginning, because an older woman I worked with early on told me that documentation is the only proof you were ever there. I had just finished 6 years working for a family in Pasadena, the Yamamoto family, and they had relocated to Tokyo. I received my final paycheck, my reference letter, and a long hug from Mrs. Carol Yamamoto, who told me with wet eyes, "Loretta, whoever hires you next is going to be incredibly lucky." I held that close. It was Carol and her son who gave my name to the Whitmore family in Bel Air. They said the family was looking for someone experienced and trustworthy to manage a large estate. The position offered $22 an hour, full-time, with benefits through their household payroll company. Workers' compensation, paid time off, overtime as required by California law. I said yes immediately. The interview was with Mr. Douglas Whitmore, a man in his mid-50s. Tailored blazer, firm handshake, the voice of someone accustomed to being heard. He asked about my experience. I told him everything from memory. Every house, every family, every function I'd served. He called Carol Yamamoto right in front of me and stayed on the line for nearly 10 minutes, listening. When he hung up, he said, "You can start Monday." What he didn't tell me, what I didn't know yet, was who would be in that house Monday morning. I arrived at the Bel Air estate on Stone Canyon Road at 7:40. The property was enormous, 4 bedrooms, a guest house, a pool, security cameras at every turn. Pearl, the cook, opened the gate for me. She was 60 years old, silver locks pinned back, a blue apron, and a directness I recognized immediately. The manner of someone who has no time for small talk because there is real work to be done. "Welcome," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're going to like it here. Mr. Whitmore is decent. The house is manageable." She paused. "There's just one thing I need to tell you before you go upstairs." I looked at her. "His daughter got back from a trip yesterday. She stays here sometimes. When she's here," she didn't finish the sentence, just shook her head in a way that needed no translation. I nodded, filed it away. The first 2 hours were fine. Pearl showed me every room, every supply closet, every cleaning product, and its proper place. She explained the household routine, Mr. Whitmore's preferences, the schedule. I repeated each piece of information to myself as she spoke, organizing it in my head the way I always do. By the time she finished, I knew the house by heart. I started with the kitchen, organized the spice cabinet by frequency of use, cleaned the back of the refrigerator, mopped the stone floor until it reflected the morning light coming through the windows. I was going to get a fresh cloth from the utility room when I saw the note on the counter. It was a handwritten message left there. I knew it had words. I knew it had a phone number at the bottom. I stood looking at it for a moment. That moment I know so well, when the letters are right in front of me and I need to put them together in a way my mind still hasn't fully learned to do. I picked it up, thinking I'd carry it to Pearl to explain what it said, and that was the exact moment I heard heels on the marble floor in the hallway. Ashley Whitmore walked into the kitchen with a coffee cup in one hand, hair still damp, workout clothes on, and the eyes of someone who wakes up tired of her own privilege. She had her mother's bone structure and her father's title, and none of the qualities of either one. She looked me up and down. "You're the new one?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "What's your name?" "Loretta, miss." She scanned the kitchen. "Cleaning?" "Yes, miss." "Good." She went to the refrigerator, turned her back to me, and in that moment, Diane, the other houseworker I hadn't yet gotten to know who handled the laundry, came down the hall with a basket of clothes. That was when Ashley turned back and saw me holding the note. "What's that?" she asked. "A message that was on the counter. I was going to bring it to Pearl." She held out her hand. "Give it here." I gave it to her. She read it in 2 seconds, then looked at me, then looked at the note again, then raised her eyes with an expression I am never going to forget. It wasn't anger. It was something worse than anger. It was entertainment. "Diane!" she called, not taking her eyes off me. Diane stopped in the doorway. "Come here." Diane came, still holding the basket. "Go get Marcus from out front too," Ashley said. "And Rosa." Diane went. She came back 30 seconds later with Rosa, the other housekeeper, and Marcus, the groundskeeper, a man of 65 who had been working on that property for 7 years. Pearl appeared behind them, dish towel in hand, feeling the weight of what was coming before she understood exactly what it was. Ashley waited until everyone was in place. Then she held up the note like someone presenting evidence in a courtroom. "This note," she said with that deliberate voice of someone who enjoys hearing their own echo, "has been sitting on this counter since last night. It's a message from the plumber about a pipe in the utility room. Simple. Anyone can read it in 10 seconds. She looked at me. I found our new housekeeper holding it like it was some kind of mystery object. So I thought I'd ask." She tilted her head. "Loretta, can you read this out loud for everyone?" The silence that followed that question was the kind that presses down on you. I didn't answer. "You can't?" She read it aloud, slowly, sounding out each word like she was demonstrating something to a classroom. The plumber's name, the issue with the pipe, the callback number, Then she lowered the paper and looked straight at me. You can't read? It wasn't a question. It's not exactly like that, I said, with the voice I had managed to keep steady until that point. I can recognize letters, You can't read. She repeated it the way people repeat things when they want to make sure you understand you're the problem. A housekeeper who can't read doesn't belong in this house. She set the note back on the counter with a calm that was more violent than any shouting. You're done here. You can get your things. I looked at her. I looked at Diane, whose eyes were on the floor. I looked at Marcus, who was suddenly very interested in the view through the kitchen window. I looked at Pearl, and Pearl was looking back at me, with an expression I only understood later. She had her hand in her apron pocket, and whatever was in that pocket was not sitting still. I untied my apron, folded it carefully, the way I had folded aprons in so many kitchens over so many years, picked up my bag from the bench in the utility room, and walked out the side door with the same steady step I had walked in with. But something had changed inside me in that walk out. It wasn't sadness. I had felt sadness before. This was something colder and quieter, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't cry, that simply settles in and waits. I had been let go on my first day of work, in my first 2 hours, because I couldn't read a note from a plumber, by a girl who had never needed to read anything that wasn't paid for by her father, and I thought, all right, Ashley. You thought you knew me in 10 minutes, but you didn't know me at all. I walked 3 blocks, sat on a bench near the Stone Canyon Reservoir, bag in my lap, morning sun on my face, and stayed there for a time I couldn't have measured, thinking about Carol Yamamoto, thinking about what she would say when I called, thinking about 24 years of honest work that didn't fit inside a plumber's note. That was when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. Loretta? The voice was familiar, but it took me a beat. It's Kevin. Kevin Yamamoto. My stomach turned over. Kevin Yamamoto, Carol's son. I need to tell you who Kevin Yamamoto was before I tell you what happened next, because without understanding who he was, you won't understand the size of what Ashley Whitmore had done without realizing it. Kevin was 47 years old, son of Carol and Hiroshi Yamamoto, a family of Japanese-American descent who had built one of the most significant real estate investment funds in the western United States. When his parents relocated to Tokyo 3 years ago, Kevin stayed. He expanded, he turned a regional fund into a national operation, and then into a fund with holdings across North America and East Asia. He was the managing partner of a $4 billion fund, and he was the single largest strategic partner that Douglas Whitmore had spent 9 months trying to close a deal with. I didn't know any of that when I worked in the Yamamoto house for 6 years. I knew the family had money. You couldn't miss it. But money in the house where you work becomes scenery. You stop counting the size of the windows. You look at the person, not the property. And Kevin, to me, was Carol's son, the one who showed up on weekends, who ate my sweet potato pie with the expression of someone who has been genuinely fed, who asked how I was doing and waited for the real answer before he changed the subject, who once helped me carry grocery bags in from the car because I had a sprained wrist and didn't ask someone else to do it for him, who, when I left for good, handed me an envelope with 2 months extra pay I wasn't expecting and said, "You deserve more than we could ever give you." When he called that October morning while I was sitting on a bench near a reservoir in Bel Air, my first reaction was confusion. How did he know what had happened? I had barely made it outside. "Loretta," he said, "I know you just left the Whitmore property. My mother called me. The reference she gave for you came through my office. Douglas consulted me before he brought you on." I stayed quiet. "What happened over there?" I told him. Told him everything, in the steady voice I had, no drama, no embellishment, just the facts, in the order they occurred. The note, the girl, the audience she assembled, the sentence, the dismissal. There was a pause on his end. "Where are you right now?" "On a bench, near the reservoir." "Don't move, I'm on my way." 40 minutes later, a dark car pulled up and Kevin Yamamoto got out with the same calm he always carried. Open collar, dress slacks, no tie. He sat down next to me on that bench like it was the most natural thing in the world. A 47-year-old fund manager sitting beside a former housekeeper in the California morning sun. "Tell me again," he said. "Everything." I told him again. And as I did, I watched his expression change, not to anger exactly, to something more calculated. the look of someone hearing a piece of information fall into a place they hadn't expected. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Loretta," he said, "do you know that I'm in negotiations with Douglas Whitmore?" I didn't. 9 months of talks. My fund coming into his development group. It's a significant deal. He paused. "Last night I called Douglas to cancel tomorrow's meeting because I had heard things about how the household is managed that made me uncomfortable. I hadn't made a final decision yet." I looked at him. "I have now," he said simply. Those 3 words were the ones that changed everything. But before I tell you what happened the next morning, before I tell you what Kevin did, what Douglas did, and what was left of Ashley after all of it, I need to tell you about Pearl. Because without Pearl, half of this story doesn't exist. Pearl had been born and raised in Compton, come up cleaning houses in her 20s, and had been working for the Whitmore family for 11 years. 11 years of early mornings, of meals made with care for people who rarely said thank you, of a house she knew better than anyone living in it. She had seen a lot in that house. She had watched Ashley grow up, and she had watched what growing up without limits does to a person. When Ashley started spending more time at the estate after she got back from studying in Italy, Pearl started paying closer attention, not out of malice, out of survival, because she knew, the way you know after 11 years in a house, that this girl was capable of anything without consequence, because her father had always cleaned it up before it became a story. 4 months before I arrived, Ashley had done the same thing to another woman, a lady named Darlene, who had come from Alabama, who also had her limitations with reading and who had also been put on display in the kitchen in front of the whole household staff. Darlene had left in tears without even collecting what she was owed. Pearl had recorded that too. And there was another recording, from a woman named Gloria, 8 months before Darlene. The same pattern, the same kitchen, the same summoned audience. 2 videos on Pearl's phone, waiting for a moment she didn't yet know when it would come. That morning, when Ashley started staging the scene in the kitchen, Pearl slipped her hand into her apron pocket and opened her camera without taking the phone out. She recorded the audio. She recorded enough. When I walked out, she went to the bathroom, locked the door, and sent me the recording over text with 4 words. "Keep this safe, Loretta." I saw the message on my bench near the reservoir, but I listened to it later, with Kevin beside me. Ashley's voice coming through the phone speaker, slow and deliberate, sounding out the words, followed by, "A housekeeper who can't read doesn't belong in this house." Kevin listened all the way through without saying anything. After a silence that felt long, he spoke. "Do you have an employment attorney?" "No." "You will." Patricia Okonkwo had an office in mid-Wilshire, on the 4th floor of a building that looked modest from the street, and proved the opposite once you understood what happened inside it. She was one of the best domestic workers employment attorneys in Los Angeles County, with 20 years of practice and a reputation she didn't need to advertise because clients came to her by word of mouth. Kevin brought me there that same afternoon. Patricia listened to everything. She listened to the recording. She asked what I had signed at the interview, what I had been given, what I had received. "Did you clock in or sign in anywhere when you arrived?" she asked. "There was a visitor log at the gate. I signed in at 7:40. "How long were you there before you were dismissed?" "Just under 2 hours. "And there were witnesses to the dismissal?" "She called the entire household staff to come and watch." Patricia looked at Kevin. Kevin looked at me. Termination on the first day of employment, without legitimate cause. Inability to read is not a legally valid reason for termination and is potentially a basis for a disability discrimination claim under California's Fair Employment and Housing Act, she said, with the calm voice of someone who has explained this 1,000 times. The manner in which the dismissal was conducted, assembling witnesses specifically to observe, publicly exposing a personal limitation, constitutes workplace harassment. We have the recording, we have the witnesses, we have the gate log. She closed her notepad. This is a wrongful termination claim, a harassment claim, and potentially a discrimination claim. California Labor Code and FEHA give us significant ground. How long does something like this take? I asked. To resolve? With what we have? And depending on how eager they are to avoid a public proceeding, weeks, possibly less. They are going to want to settle quietly. I thought for a moment. I don't want it to just be a quiet settlement. I want her to understand what she did. Patricia looked at me with an expression that was half smile, half professional respect. "Then we do this properly," she said. That night, Lying in my rental room in Inglewood, staring at the ceiling, I thought about Ashley. I tried to understand, not excuse, understand, where that kind of effortless cruelty came from. She hadn't yelled at me. She hadn't called me names. She had done something worse. She had used me as entertainment for an audience of workers who depended on her family's paycheck to survive. And she had done it with the ease of someone who has never once considered that there might be a consequence. Who had taught her she could do that? Who had stayed quiet the first time, the 10th time, the 100th times before me? I wasn't angry at Ashley. I had something clearer than anger. I had the certainty that someone, at some point, needed to be the first person in her life to say no, to show her that the world outside that estate ran by different rules, that power has limits, that your parents' money does not purchase your immunity. If that someone was going to be me, then so be it. I had come to work honestly. I was leaving with something more valuable, a righteous case and the evidence to back it up. I fell asleep thinking about that. The next morning, early, my phone buzzed. Pearl, Loretta, there are things you need to know. We met at a diner on La Brea before 8. She came straight from work, still in her apron, not telling anyone where she was going. Sit down, she said when I walked in. This is going to take a minute. I ordered coffee. She ordered water. You know Ashley has done this before, she began. You sent me the videos, 2 of them, 3. She looked at me. I have 3 videos. Darlene was the last one before you. Before Darlene there was Gloria about 8 months back. And before Gloria there was a woman named Beverly when I first started keeping track. Beverly I didn't film. I hadn't thought to yet, but she told me everything. I held my coffee cup with both hands. Every time it's the same setup, Pearl continued. She waits until she finds something. A limitation, a mistake, anything she can use. And then she stages it, calls everyone in, makes the whole production out of it, fires you in front of witnesses so nobody forgets who runs things. She paused. Mr. Whitmore never knew, or he chose not to know. Amounts to the same thing. Why didn't you leave? I asked her. Pearl was quiet for a beat. Because I need the job. Because I have a grandson in college. Because I'm the one holding my household together. She looked at me with absolute honesty. And because I promised myself I was going to use those recordings someday, I just needed to wait for the right person. I understood. Will you testify? I asked. Already called Patricia this morning. Already confirmed. We sat there for a moment in silence, drinking our coffee and water. 2 women the Bel Air estate had discarded, or tried to discard, sitting in a diner on La Brea like the world had gotten a little bit more honest, just by our being there together. One more thing, Pearl said before she stood. When you go to collect your final paperwork, Kevin Yamamoto is going to be there. I know. Mr. Whitmore doesn't know you 2 know each other. I know. She gave me a small smile. The smile of someone who has been waiting a long time to see the end of a particular story. It's going to be something to see, she said. The Whitmore Group offices were in a glass tower on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica, 14th floor, with views out to the Pacific and a lobby that smelled like new carpet and self-importance. I walked in wearing the same blue blouse from the day before, my bag over my shoulder, my case already filed by Patricia, and the calm of someone who has nothing left to lose, which is, as it turns out, the most difficult kind of person to intimidate. The receptionist looked at me with the expression of someone trying to figure out which category I belonged in. I'm here to collect my termination documentation from HR, I said. And I have a meeting. With whom? With Mr. Douglas Whitmore. He just doesn't know it yet. She blinked. It was at that moment that the elevator doors opened and Kevin Yamamoto walked into the lobby with 2 members of his team, a portfolio under his arm. That same unhurried presence I knew from the Yamamoto dining room. He saw me, smiled, the kind of smile that only means something to people who know the person behind it. Loretta, he said, walking over with his hand extended, ready to get started? The receptionist was watching us both with an expression that suggested she was doing math she couldn't quite solve. I took a slow breath. She let me go yesterday, I said, quietly enough for just the 2 of us. His daughter said I couldn't read. Kevin held my gaze for a moment. Then he turned to his assistant and said calmly, "Tell the team we need 15 minutes before we go up to see Douglas." The assistant stepped away. Kevin walked to the reception desk, asked to speak with Douglas Whitmore, and said only this. "It's personal and it's urgent. Tell him it's about the housekeeper his daughter dismissed yesterday." 3 minutes later, Douglas Whitmore appeared in the lobby. He was a man who filled a room, broad-shouldered, silver-templed, the confidence of someone who had never had reason to question whether he belonged somewhere. But when he saw Kevin Yamamoto standing next to me, something crossed his face, a small hesitation, almost imperceptible. I caught it. "Kevin," he said, with the smile powerful men use when they're not sure what's happening but can't let that show. "Good to see you. And this is Loretta Washington," Kevin said. "She worked for my family for 6 years. She is one of the most trustworthy people I know." Douglas Whitmore looked at me. "Your daughter dismissed her yesterday," Kevin continued, with the same measured voice he would use for a quarterly report. "On her first day of employment, in front of the entire household staff, because she wasn't able to read a handwritten note." He paused. "I needed you to know that before we had any further conversation about our business." The lobby went quiet. The receptionist was studying her computer screen with intense focus. Douglas Whitmore looked at me for a long moment. Then he closed his eyes briefly, the way people do when they are counting internally to some number. "Can I speak with you privately?" he said to me. "You can," I said. "But my attorney has already been notified. Any conversation about the legal matter needs to include her." "I'm not asking about the legal matter." He met my eyes with an expression I hadn't expected. Not defensiveness, not arrogance, something closer to shame. "I want to understand what happened," I told him, right there in the lobby, standing, because no one had offered me a seat. I told him from beginning to end, with the same steadiness I always had. When I finished, Douglas Whitmore was quiet for a stretch of time that was too long to be comfortable. "Where is my daughter right now?" he asked, more to himself than to me. "I don't know, Mr. Whitmore." He took out his phone, dialed, waited. "Ash!" His voice had changed. Not the lobby voice anymore, something else entirely. "I need you to come down here, right now." Ashley Whitmore arrived 20 minutes later. She walked into the lobby with the same confidence she'd had the morning before. Bag over her shoulder, sunglasses still on, and only took them off when she saw who was waiting for her. Her father, Kevin Yamamoto, me. She looked at me. I looked back at her. "Ashley," her father said, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened yesterday at the house." She looked at Kevin. I could see her trying to read the room, who this man was standing next to me, what I was doing here, how large the problem was. I watched her calculate. I watched her decide she could still frame this her way. "Dad," she said, with the tone of someone who has always been able to talk their way through things, "the employee wasn't qualified for—" "I didn't ask you if she was qualified," he cut her off, with a coldness that surprised me. "I asked you what happened." Ashley stopped. "In front of the other staff?" Pause. "You called them in specifically to witness it?" Smaller pause. "Because she couldn't read a handwritten note?" Silence. "Ashley." The way he said her name then was unlike anything I had heard before. Not anger, exhaustion. The voice of someone who is tired of cleaning up what another person keeps spilling. "This is not the first time." She opened her mouth. "Don't." He raised his hand. "It isn't." And I looked the other way. That was my failure. He turned to Kevin. "I apologize for this situation." Kevin nodded without speaking. "I'll talk to you later," Douglas said to his daughter. Then he looked at me. "Ms. Washington, my attorney will be in contact with yours by end of day. This will be resolved fairly. I give you my word." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." "No." He shook his head slowly. "I owe you the apology. On behalf of my family." I looked at him. And in that moment, for the first time since I'd walked into that lobby, I felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness. Forgiveness takes time. Something closer to recognition. The rare, strange feeling of being seen by someone who could have chosen not to see you. Ashley stood there, bag on her shoulder, sunglasses in her hand, looking at me with an expression I hadn't expected either. Not defiance. Something approaching embarrassment. The look of someone receiving, for the first time in their life, a bill they hadn't known they were running up. I didn't say anything to her. I didn't need to. The settlement came together within 3 weeks. $48,000, lost wages, statutory penalties under the California Labor Code, and compensatory damages for emotional distress under FEHA. Patricia told me we could have pushed for more, but I had chosen a resolution over a prolonged fight, and I stood by that. The money was not the point. The point was a clause, drafted at my request and agreed to by the Whitmore family's legal team, acknowledging that the termination was conducted in a manner inconsistent with the employee's dignity, and that the conduct exhibited constituted harassment as defined under California employment law. It wasn't a press release. It was something more precise, a document with their signatures saying, in legal language but with human meaning, that they had been wrong. I put that document in a clear plastic folder next to my social security card. Kevin Yamamoto, for his part, withdrew from the Whitmore Group negotiations entirely. Not as a direct punishment, he was careful to say that. But he sent a letter through his counsel stating that the way an organization treats its most vulnerable workers tells you more about its institutional culture than any balance sheet, and that he needed more time to evaluate that culture before he could move forward. Douglas Whitmore lost the $4 billion deal. Not because of me, because of his daughter. From what Pearl told me afterward, Douglas sat with that letter for a long time after he received it. Then he called Ashley into his home office and closed the door. Pearl didn't hear what was said, but she told me Ashley came out with red eyes and didn't appear at the estate for the better part of a month. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard that. I felt something different, something closer to relief. The feeling that in this one case the world had worked the way it's supposed to work. The action produced a consequence. The cruelty met resistance. The invisible became visible. 3 weeks after the settlement, Kevin called. "Loretta, are you working?" "Looking, yes. I have a proposal for you." He was direct, the way he always was. "I have my primary residence here in Los Angeles, a vacation home in Montecito, and a property in Napa Valley. Right now I have 3 different people handling each one, with no coordination between them. What I need is someone who can run all 3, who knows how each property should function, who manages the staff at each location, who is my single point of contact for everything household-related." He paused. "It would be a household director position, salary of $7,000 a month, W-2 employment, fully on the books, health insurance through my company plan, and use of the guest cottage at the Bel Air property if you want it." I was quiet for a moment. $7,000, I said, plus paid time off, retirement contribution, and overtime as applicable under California law. Full compliance. It was more than triple the highest hourly rate I had ever earned. It was more than I had imagined earning. It was, and I needed a moment to let this settle. The concrete, documented acknowledgement in dollars and in a proper employment contract of what 24 years of honest work was worth to someone who had actually seen me. "I accept," I said. "Good." He paused. "One more thing. I know it's personal, but have you thought about going back to school? There are excellent adult literacy programs in Los Angeles. The library system runs them, free of charge, and some of the community colleges have evening courses specifically designed for adult learners." I was quiet. "I'm not asking because you need to be able to read to do this job," he said quickly. The way someone says something quickly when they want to make sure it doesn't land wrong. "You've already proven you don't. I'm asking because the Loretta I know does everything she sets her mind to, and if you decide to do it, you will." I looked out the window of my rental room in Inglewood. The morning light was coming through the blinds the way morning light comes when it's decided it's coming in no matter what. "I'll think about it," I said, but I already knew what the answer was. Today I wake up at 6 in the morning in the guest cottage on the Bel Air property. It's a small space, but it's mine. There's a window with a view of the garden, a shower with good pressure, a little kitchen where I can make my coffee and my biscuits the way I like them. I have a key to the main house. I have a work phone. I have 5 staff members across 3 properties that I coordinate, each one properly classified as an employee, with taxes withheld and benefits provided, because that was the first thing I asked for when I took the position. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, I go to an adult literacy class at the Santa Monica Public Library. My instructor's name is Margaret. She is 54 years old and has the patience of someone who chose this work on purpose and has never regretted it. In 6 months, I learned to read whole words. In 8 months, I read my first full paragraph without stopping. Last week, I read the instructions on a box of cold medicine and stood there for a moment looking at them like it was an enormous accomplishment. It was. I hear that Douglas Whitmore is trying to reopen a conversation with Kevin's fund through other channels. I don't know if it'll go anywhere. It's not my concern anymore. I hear Ashley is working at another firm, in a junior role, reporting to a female manager who has no patience for performance art. I hope she's learning something. Before I go, I need to speak to you directly. Not as a character in a story, as Loretta for real. Not being able to read is not a character flaw. It is a failure of access, of the school that didn't reach you, the system that decided certain children could wait, the circumstances that took you out of the classroom before the classroom could do its job. I worked for 24 years with excellence, without being able to read a text off a page. I managed households, raised other people's children, ran kitchens and schedules and supply budgets from memory. My illiteracy did not make me less. It made me develop other capacities, memory, observation, listening, presence, that many people who read fluently have never needed to build. But Ashley used it as a weapon, and she was able to use it because the stigma is real, the weight is real, and the doors it closes are real. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, roughly 36 million adults in the United States have low literacy skills. That is not a personal failure across 36 million people. That is a systemic one. If you work as a housekeeper, a nanny, a personal assistant, a caregiver, a cook, a groundskeeper, whether you can read or not, you have rights that many employers count on you not knowing. In California, the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights guarantees you overtime pay after 9 hours in a day or 45 hours in a week and protects you from retaliation for asserting your rights. Federal law prohibits employment discrimination on the basis of disability, which can include learning disabilities and literacy challenges. Termination for not being able to read may be actionable under both federal and state anti-discrimination law. If you are fired, you are entitled to your final paycheck on the day of termination in California. If that doesn't happen, your employer is subject to waiting time penalties. If you are fired in a manner designed to humiliate you, especially in front of coworkers, that conduct can constitute workplace harassment. If you cannot afford an attorney, California's Department of Industrial Relations and the Labor Commissioner's Office take complaints for free. Many legal aid organizations across the country specifically serve domestic workers. The National Domestic Workers Alliance can connect you with resources in your state. Keep your texts, keep your voicemails, write down dates, keep anything you signed. Those records are the difference between a case you can bring and one that disappears because there's nothing on paper. And if anyone uses something about you, your background, your accent, your education, your literacy, as a reason to treat you as less inside a house where you are doing real and honest work, that is not feedback. That is abuse. Abuse has a name, it has a law, and it has consequences. It took me 43 years to learn that the hard way. You don't have to wait that long. Thank you for staying here with me until the end. This story took 43 years to happen, and I'm glad I got to tell it. If it reached you, if at any point you recognize something of yourself inside it, then every word was worth it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Share this with someone who works in a home, who has a mother or grandmother who has done this work, who knows a Loretta somewhere in their life. This story is for them. And tell me in the comments, what skill do you have? Or does someone you know have, that the people around you never take seriously, but that one day is going to change everything? I want to read every single answer. She said I couldn't read, but she was the one who couldn't read the room, and that was the biggest mistake of her life.